The views and opinions of this broadcast do not reflect the views and opinions of Armed Media, New Productions and its affiliates. Enjoy the show.
Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.
Yes, good evening, everybody. This is Rob Rosenthal, your host on All You Can Eat. It's the podcast about deliciousness, coming to you from New York today on June the 6th of 2018. This is episode number 15, and it's an interesting one because it is a... how would you describe it? Kind of like a compendium of things. I have a number of fascinating guests tonight that we've put together, and a couple of comments that I will bring you myself on the state of food television and a recent experience that I had in New Orleans. Tonight on the show, we'll have a chat with Coleman Andrews, easily one of the foremost food authorities in the world. Coleman and I talk a little bit about margaritas and cheese, because the man knows his cheese. Veronica Chambers is on the podcast this evening. You want to talk about prolific. The woman has written over 24 books and collaborated on 4 New York Times bestsellers, including with superstar celebrity chefs Marcus Samuelsson and Eric Ripert. Veronica and I have a quick conversation about Mr. Ripert, the great chef from Le Bernardin here in New York. Ivy Manning is on the podcast this evening. Ivy and I talk about sake, and Ivy knows about food. 8-time cookbook author Ivy Manning. Also tonight, Mitch Frank, news editor, Wine Spectator magazine, very impressive, prestigious magazine, and Mitch has the current story about rosé. It's the cover story about rosé. He and I talk a lot, and I learn a ton about rosé from Mitch. And also on the podcast this evening, Chef Ron Silver, not only a chef, but also a cannabis entrepreneur. So he and I are going to have a conversation about cannabis, getting into edibles. All right, and so here we go. First up is Coleman. And I asked him about cheese. I'll have you know, by the way, having come back from New Orleans this very past weekend, that I had my first ever Sazerac.
Oh,
yeah. I mean,
did you like it?
I liked it a lot. Yeah, I liked it a real lot. And I'm with you, by the way. I've never gotten into any of these, cocktails made by mixologists that have rosemary and these. There's just too much going on. I guess I'm kind of more of a purist. I'm happy with a martini. Are your martinis, by the way, gin or vodka?
Martinis are made with gin.
Good, perfect. I just wanted to make sure that we were really clear on that, because they've named.
I guess there's something called a vodka martini, but if you don't specify it's made with gin.
No, good. I just wanted to make sure that we're good on that. I also noticed, by the way, that in our in the meal that we put together, that we didn't include dessert. So what I'd like to say to you is that I would rather have cheese after a meal than a sweet dessert.
Yeah,
okay.
Me too. I'm not a big sweet eater.
Well, let me quote you again, Mr. Andrews. You said, "Cheese may well be my greatest culinary vice. I love it. All kinds of it, soft, ripe, and hard, goat and sheep and cow, handcrafted and occasionally even crafted in the form, for instance, of Texas queso. If I go a day without making its acquaintance in some form or another, I feel diminished. If I could give up cheese entirely, I'm firmly convinced that I drop 40 pounds in a year, but me giving up cheese is no more likely than me giving up alcohol." So, that said, as a guy who is no cheese authority, speaking about myself, I like a good Parmigiano. I'm happy with French Gruyere, which I learned all about in cooking school. I will never forget when I had, I think it was the first time I had ever been to France, and I had Livarot, which I made the mistake. Oh my God, I made the mistake. Coleman, I brought it on the plane with me on the way back, I think illegally, and the whole plane by the end of the thing, it smelled like vomit. I'm happy with a nice aged Gouda, and I like a nice blue, whether it's going to be Stilton or Roquefort or Gorgonzola. But do me a favor and school me on cheese, please. What am I missing? What kind of cheese must I have that I haven't?
Well, I mean, one of the classics that you didn't mention is genuine English farmhouse cheddar.
Okay.
It's really nothing to do with the little bars of yellow stuff that you buy in the supermarket. I think there's so much good cheese made in this country now, and I think there's a cheesemaker in Georgia called Sweetgrass Dairy, and they have a soft, ripe cheese. It's like a sort of like a camembert style or something that is just extraordinary. Another one, which is actually called camembert, although it's not much like camembert, but it's really, really good, comes from New York State, from Old Chatham Sheep Herding Company. There's that style of soft ripe, really good. Again, as I sort of said about the cheddar, if you get really good French from unpasteurized milk, brie, brie de Meaux, M-E-A-U-X, for instance, again, it's nothing like what you buy here packaged up, cut into wedges and things, and it's really an extraordinary cheese, and the riper it gets, the more runny it gets. And I remember an English friend of mine said there's 3 stages of brie. There's firm, soft, and quick Mabel. It's getting out the door. Right. And you get to that quick Mabel stage, and it's really wonderful. And you just spread it on a nice hunk of bread and crusty bread, and it's pretty great. I mean, if you go on and on about cheese, there's Parmigiano Reggiano as an eating cheese, if you get it, is really wonderful. I mean, it's great, obviously grated also, but that's pretty extraordinary. Really good Fontina from the Alps is one of my favorite cheeses. Roquefort is of all the blues, I think my favorite, although I like Stilton and Gorgonzola too, and some American blues. There's so many different styles of cheese. I tend to gravitate, though, toward what they call the cooked cheeses, like the Gruyères and the Comté and the cheddars and things like that. Although, really, I like almost everything. The Livarot is not one of my favorites, I have to say.
Do you shop at Costco at all?
I don't. I probably should.
Well, all I'm going to say is people know me as the Costco ho. I mean, I'm there every week of my life, and all I'm going to tell you is that I can go into Costco any week, and I do. And here's the good and the limitation. I can buy real Parmesan Reggiano there. I think it's only going to be aged like, let's say, 2 years. I can buy Comté, which is lovely. So again, you what I'm saying is from a price value standpoint and quality standpoint, it's fantastic.
Yeah, they also have a very good wine selection, apparently.
Well, if you're in Jersey, not in New York, in other words, you have to be in a state where it's okay. And yeah, I've saved a fortune. I bought a bottle of Bullet bourbon there, like a giant bottle, like a 2-liter thing. And yeah, you save a fortune. Well, having learned a little bit about cheese, I think it's time to move into wine, and given that it's summertime, we might as well talk about rosé. Mitch Frank is an expert, and here's what he has to say about rosé. So let's cut over to your article that I mentioned before. It is the cover story of the current issue, June 2018 issue of Wine Spectator. And it's a story that's all about rosé. I want to say a couple of things, which is this. First of all, congratulations, because the article is terrific, and I'm telling you, I'm not prone to either hyperbole or BS. I read the article 3 times. It was that good. So I will say to anybody who doesn't happen to subscribe to Wine Spectator, if you grab yourself a copy, because you want to know anything about rosé, how it came to be where it is right now, which is like explosively popular. This is a great article to read, and I also congratulate you, Mitch, because the last time your Wine Spectator wrote a cover story about rosé was 10 years ago.
Yeah, and I wrote that one, and at the time there wasn't a huge amount of interest, so we were ahead of the curve. And now certainly rosé is riding a big wave. And it's the June 30th issue. We actually have 2 issues out this month, so look for the one with the rosé on the cover. And we've got some fun bottles, because the great thing about rosé is it comes in a lot of different shades, a lot of different shades of pink, and a lot of different fun bottles. It's supposed to be a fun wine. What is it that?
So again, when I talk about the kind of, it seems to me that it's this enormous. I hate to use the word trendy. It's just that I've seen more rosé in the past couple of summers than I've ever seen at any time in my life, and I'm happy. I don't know. I'm no wine expert here. Like, I'm happy drinking any color pretty much any time. But what do you think? What accounts for kind of the explosive growth? I think I saw in your article 44% sales increase year over year. What accounts for the kind of the growth, the phenomenal growth of rosé?
I think there are a lot of different factors. For one, I think it's a question of after the financial crisis and the Great Recession, a lot of people were looking for affordable luxury. And a lot of rosé gives that. It's not fussy. It's not, people don't get as intimidated with it. You can just open a bottle and you don't have to worry too much about it. The other thing is, Provence really made a big impact here. For a long time, Provence has made great rosés for decades and centuries, but they were happy to drink most of it at home. And quality was not a big focus. But really, in the past 20 years, they upped the quality of their game, and then they made a big push here because they thought that younger drinkers here would be interested. And they really kind of caught people's attention. They've been slowly working on the idea that, one, rosé is not necessarily sweet, because most people here remember White Zin. Back in the 80s, when that was a huge boom, and they remember it was sweet. They saw pink and they thought sweet, and that's not the case with Provençal rosé. And they also said, it's not sweet, and you don't have to just drink it in the summer. It's a very food flexible, fun wine.
You mentioned Provence, and I guess. If somebody said to me, here's the limit of what I would know, basically, Domaine Art or Bandol, like that feels to me as a former kind of, marketing branding guy, those really stand out as kind of known, high level, I think, brands. But I guess my question to you is, does it have to be Provence? I think part of your article was, no, there's some rosé being produced in other parts of the world. What is it about? What other places? What's the thinking about? From you as from an expert, like it doesn't have to be Provence. Where else can we get great rosé from?
Well, really anywhere where they're growing red grapes and the weather is warm, rosé usually has taken hold. If you think about it, all these places where it's nice and warm and sunny, which is ideal for ripening red grapes, but at the same time, it's too hot in the summer to drink a lot of heavy red. They've made rosé. Spain has a long history of great rosés. They call it rosado, and they make it from garnacha. It tends to be, it varies from producer to producer. They tend to be a little darker colored. Tavel is a great region if you want to look in France outside Provence. It's just across the river from Châteauneuf-du-Pape. They make kind of a deep orange-colored rosé, and it's got some more heft and some more structure. California has caught on now, and they're making some nice dry rosés as well. Italy, too. So there's a lot of potential. Oregon, I'm seeing more and more rosé of Pinot Noir from Oregon on the market. So there's a lot out there, and that's kind of one of the things I call out in my article. Is it's a bit of a warning sign that so much of the rosé on the market now is either Provence or modeled on Provence, and your rosé should taste like the place it came from. What works in Provence does not necessarily work in California or Spain. And the beauty of rosé is that it comes in so much variety. So I would encourage your listeners to go out and try a bunch of different styles and different shades.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, and I want to get to some of what those might be. I think what I discovered from the article was something that kind of doesn't surprise me in some ways about the American palate, which tends to be tentative, I guess is the way I would say it. You have producers and importers who are saying that if they don't shade the wine in the classic shade of that light pink, or however you want to describe the Provençal rosé, that they can't sell it. In other words, the people here are Americans, that is to say, are inclined to kind of consume what it is that looks comfortable, familiar, and comfortable to them, versus the idea of, wait a second, you mean I can get a rosé that's like way darker or orange tinted? That's interesting to me. Can you help me with that a little?
Yeah, I think that's one of the great things about it is, as I said, the variety. And I would encourage people, what I was hearing from producers is a bit of concern. Rosé styles are still growing in this country, but for the first time this year, we're starting to see so many brands coming into the market that it's starting to hurt sales for some of them. There's been kind of a flood. And as you were saying, it's all kind of one style. And I love value as much as the next consumer, but a lot of it tends to be under $10. Yeah. Which, if you can find quality, that's great. But a lot of times that low price is because a lot of corners have been cut. Yeah. And we're seeing some wines that don't meet the quality that we look for. So I would encourage people to be looking for more diversity and look for more. And that doesn't mean Provençal Rosé isn't fantastic. We recommend a lot of wines in the issue, and you can also find our app Wine Ratings Plus on your phone for Android or for the iPhone, and you can find lots of recommendations there to help you find a good quality rosé at a great value price. But you have to do a little bit of your homework now, which it's a little harder when you walk into the store and you see about 50 different rosé brands on the shelf as you walk in.
Yeah, that actually is the problem in a nutshell. Honestly, I'm happy drinking wine, and I go into the wine store, and oftentimes, exactly that, confronted with too many. Like, it's almost surprising how many different, considering how expensive it is to get into the wine making business, it's kind of surprising to see how ubiquitous the selection is. I mean, it's intimidating, frankly, because again, we kind of didn't grow up here with a wine culture. And so, I guess you're in a good position. We have to depend on you because we don't really know enough about what to choose. And you also kind of have indicated that in the story itself, you've made a lot of recommendations. Am I right?
Yeah, we've got, after the main story, we've got multiple pages of recommendations from multiple regions, from France to Italy to Spain to America to other regions. Oregon, I see here. And Argentina, nice. Portugal. The idea is to give people as many options so that when they go into the store, they can look. And they can also talk to the retailer in the store. Find somebody you trust who seems to know what he's talking about. Ask him what he likes. And if he's just trying to steer you to something that they're trying to clear out, that's one thing. But if he's as enthused about wine as you are, he's going to help you, or she, find something that really makes you happy. and tell them what you're eating that night. Because one of the great things I find, I'm always surprised that we don't drink more rosé down here in New Orleans. I find that rosé grows pretty well with a crawfish boil, or Asian cuisine. We have a lot of great Vietnamese food, or a lot of other great foods that have some spice to them.
I think part of by the way, I think part of the appeal is, you mentioned in the article how well rosé pairs with food. So I'm going to talk to you about that. And I think also the price point. I got to say that even though, and you make a good point, I think the stuff that feels to me like the stuff that you can get below $10 for the most part is not going to be where you are. But if you're willing to spend, 15, 20, $25, you can get some really lovely, lovely rosé wine.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. You don't have to, certain varieties in certain regions, if you want quality in Napa Cabernet, it's hard to look under $40.
Right.
And it's very easy to spend $200. But with rosé, you don't have to lurch. You just have to go up a little. And like I said, there are some brands for under $10 that I think are very good.
Well,
they just take a little more of an intense search.
Anything you offhand want to mention?
Off the top of my head, that would be good. Unfortunately, I think La Ville Fermée, which is one of my favorites from the Perrin family, I think they've probably cracked. I think they're at $11 now, but it's still a great value.
No, that's sweet. That's good. All right, that's good to know. All right, now explain to people tell people what I'm going to give some names to you and tell everybody what they have in common. You ready? Drew Barrymore, Sofia Coppola, Brad Pitt, Angelina Jolie, and John Bon Jovi. What do these people all have in common?
They all make rosé.
Well, yes, exactly. Come on, I'm picking it up from your article. What is it? First of all, why? Why is there any reason at all that those people that I just mentioned got into the rosé business?
Well, for each producer, it's different. I mean, the Sofia Coppola wine is product of her father, Francis Ford Coppola, and then you have Drew Barrymore got involved in this California project, and obviously one of the most famous is Brad Pitt and Angelina Jolie's Chateau Miraval in Provence. It's fun and it's easy drinking. John Bon Jovi, who we interviewed in the issue, my colleague Jillian Ciaretta interviewed him, and he and his son decided to get into wine, and he said, when I'm in the Hamptons in the summer, that's all I drink. It's the Hamptons version of bottled water. So he said, if I'm going to make a wine, I want a wine that I'm going to drink and it's going to be fun. So they partnered with Jérôme Bouchon, who is one of the most influential winemakers in the south of France, and produced their Diving into Hamptons water, which is a fun name, and it started to sell out pretty quickly. But that's the thing. I think it's a very low pressure, fun way to get into the wine business. Because really, all of us, if we had enough money, wouldn't we buy a vineyard somewhere in the south of France?
Yeah, I'm up for that. If you find the money, count me in.
All right, I'll let you know when that happens.
Now, because you have raised the Hamptons, it's a natural segue for me to ask you about that, because you have the Wolfer estate out there, and I know it pretty well because I spent some time out there. I have gone on over the summers. It's one of the most delightful things to do, frankly, on I think it's a Friday, Saturday kind of 6 p.m. thing. You pop over there. I can bike actually over there, and you sit outside, basically on the vineyard itself, drinking Summer in a Bottle while live music is playing and kids are dancing. It's just a lovely scene. And so, Summer in a Bottle. Now, here's the thing. I'm going to ask you. You're the expert on this. I'm happy drinking this stuff. I don't actually know, where it stands on kind of the qualitatively, relative to what else is available. I will say, though, that it is a triumph of marketing. I mean, it's that between the name and the label, I think I saw somewhere in your article that, let's see exactly what it was. They went from selling pretty much nothing to selling, let me see if I can get the numbers right, 92, yeah. Oh, they went from selling 82 cases of their rosé in the year 1992 to over 60,000 cases right now. Talk a little bit about Summer in a Bottle. What's your experience with it?
Well, as you said, yeah, rosé was not a big business for them. And, I actually did a cover story on New York wines about 12 years ago. And I went to visit Wolfer, and I went and met with their talented winemaker, Roman Roth,
right.
Who's been there for decades now. And it was this great little winery out on the South Fork in the Hamptons. And they made some nice Chardonnay and some Cabernet Franc. And they weren't getting a huge traction. They made very good wine, but the locals were like, oh, it's a New York, it's a Long Island winery. And then they shifted focus to rosé, and rosé started to catch on, and now 75% of their production is rosé. They're selling 60,000 cases a year of it.
Right.
And Summer in a Bottle, you look at it and you just want to drink. You think of summer. It's got the flowers and the fruit, and it's a very fresh, kind of refined rosé, I would say. We gave their 2014 89 points, just nice. A hair short of outstanding. Uh-huh. And it really has a lot of fun. It's a interesting, fascinating blend: Merlot, Chardonnay, Cabernet Franc, Gewürztraminer. So they're really trying to give complexity. And that's really one of the keys with good rosé, is that winemaking is serious.
Having covered cheese and wine, I think it's only appropriate that we move on to something in the order of a French chef, Eric Ripert. Veronica Chambers has written the book called 32 Yolks. It is his life story, and I asked her all about Ripert. This is what she had to say. Then you do the book with Ripert, who I've always said, and I only really shook hands with him for the first time about 2 months ago, but I will tell you what I said to him as someone who's been eating in New York City restaurants since, I'm afraid to admit it, but I guess somewhere around 1970. There's a lot of good restaurants in New York City. Then there are a fewer that are extraordinary, and that place, Le Bernardin, of which he is the executive chef, that's 20 years of extraordinary results. It's like, to me, the hallmark of greatness is the consistency of quality over time, and there's nobody, I think, in America that has done at least in fish. Let's go with that. Who has done a better job of kind of excelling in the restaurant business? What he's done there is extraordinary.
He's an extraordinary human being. I mean, I literally feel that's not just a book that I'm proud to have written. It's like a person who I'm privileged to have spent time with. Yeah. I mean, I think he is someone who has thought so deeply about life and connection and what we're here for. And I mean, writing that book changed my life.
Wow.
He's an extraordinary human being, and I feel really gifted to have worked with him and Kathy Sherry, who's his director of partnerships. I mean, the two of them, just the whole team, how they do things. Aldo Song, I mean, they're just some of the most unique people, and I didn't think I was going to get that book. You know, like when you start to collaborate, it's kind of like 50 First Dates. I could literally list the dozens of people that they call and they say, come in for a meeting. You come in for a meeting and you put on a dress and your nice shoes and you go in and you try to make conversations, and then you find, oh, they've gone in a different way. It's like acting, or they don't think you're friendly enough, or they don't think you're perky, or they don't think you're intellectual enough, or whatever. And then, you know, I go in to meet this like ultra elite French chef, and I'm a Black Latina girl from Brooklyn. And before I met Marcus, I never had a tasting dinner. I never had I didn't know what 4-star dining was. You know, like I'm very much like a sort of old school, intuitive, home, slightly island influenced cook. And so I went into that meeting and I really thought I was not the one. And when they called me and offered it to me, I was really surprised. But I have to say, it was just an amazing connection. You know, Eric told the LA Times that I was the best therapist that he ever had. And, you know, I think it was this weird thing where he was sort of ready to be like grilled and kind of go there. And I felt like I understood really early on that his book was as much about masculinity and about humanity and spirituality as it was about food. I mean, I felt that within month one. I was like, oh, the food stuff I'll figure out, but I have to figure out the other stuff first. And so I think we were really well paired in that way.
I saw the when he was interviewed, I believe it was on CBS morning show, and I love that you said that he's not just you know, an exceptional chef, but an extraordinary human being. I mean, he had a difficult you know, childhood.
Yeah.
And you can speak to that, but I think also you talk about his spirituality. I think he's either a Buddhist or he practices Buddhism. He meditates.
Yeah.
I see him walk because I'm in the Central Park periodically, and I see him walk. I've seen him many times walking through the park, going over to the
He rides to work every day.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. But a Buddhist, no?
Yes, he's a Buddhist, and you know, one of the things that Eric said to me that I come back to me in waves. Also, he took the time to like teach me meditation, which has sort of changed my life.
Wow.
I mean, not sort of, changed my life in a big way. And but the thing that Eric said to me that was like the game changer is that he said one of the reasons that he hasn't expanded Le Bernardin, if you watch Anthony Bourdain's shows, there's this kind of running joke with them where Anthony's like, you're leaving money on the table. You should have like the Shake Shack equivalent of Le Bernardin and fish and chip shops and a place in the airport. And the reason why he hasn't expanded is because he says a third of his life is for himself and for his spirituality and for his development of himself. And a third of his life is for his family, for his wife and his son and his mother and his extended family. And then a third of his life is for work. And he's really figured out this balance. And he's like, if I add another restaurant to it, I won't be able to maintain that balance.
Unbelievable, yeah.
And I think about that a lot. It's what I feel like I hope I get to in the next, I say 5 years, but realistically I mean 10. I would love to feel like my life felt like a third for work, a third for my family, a third for myself. But I'm not there yet. But it's such a worthy goal to say, you know, this is enough. And this is a balance that gives me everything I can give. And it gives me everything I need. And it is all that I can give to the level that I want to give it. That's pretty exceptional, I think.
I agree with you. And I also would add, and again, this is just me, you know, speculating. I think it would be hard, even though it's been done. You know, you look at guys like Joel Robuchon, and they have multiple, you know, Michelin stars or Michelin stars in multiple restaurants. I think the level that this guy is working at Le Bernardin is such that, you know, I've always believed you can do one thing extraordinarily well, you can do two things pretty well, you can do three things, you know, rather well. But I think, you know, part of the success is the intensity of the focus in the quality that they deliver there, time in and time out. It's still so awesome.
Yeah, and I will say that as someone who had never dined at Le Bernardin before, that it is a place where, like, the consistency is. It's not like, oh, this is... I remember once I was in there with my husband, and we were seated next to these huge executives, like people you've seen on the cover of Forbes and Business Week and all these different things. And the people were so nice equally to like my husband and my parents or anyone that I've been with, and as with stars or celebrities, and the whole thing of like everyone is here to have an extraordinary experience, and it may be someone's like college graduation and they've saved for months to be there.
Right.
Like they really understand that like people come in at different levels, and it's not expense account 5-star dining, which is, you know, like it's going on a corporate card and you're going to add 20% and it's done.
Right.
It's really like if you came out with like rolls of pennies, you would get the same service. And I think it's what sets them apart. It literally, I've seen it time and time again, that somebody walks in and they think, I'm not fancy enough, or this is the one and done for me of this experience. And they have the time of their lives because the people there are committed to you having the time of your life. And that's pretty special. And I think a lot of New York restaurants do not have that ethos, and the treatment can really vary. And it's part of what is not great sometimes about like the bankerization of New York City.
Let me ask you this: since you had this experience with two superstar celebrity chefs, what did you find about them? What did they share? Certain kind of characteristics or similarities?
I think one of the reasons I love writing with chefs is that chefs are, to me, they tend not to be people who are overly educated. You know what I mean? Like both Marcus and Eric were not great students, and they came to food as part of I love food, and what am I going to do?
Right.
Because I'm not going to get into like the A levels of university in Europe, and so there's just humbleness that is really wonderful. And you know, my agent Kim Witherspoon is one of the founders of the Bronx High School of Letters, and every year they have this amazing benefit, and the chefs show up, and it's Marcus, and it's Eric, and it's Anthony Bourdain, and it's Christina Tosi, and you just see these chefs show up for these kids who live in one of the poorest districts in America, one of the most violent districts in America, but chefs get it because there's not a single celebrity chef at that level, and I'm not talking about Food Network because I don't really know that world, but at the like level of the James Beard Award, the Michelin stars, everything else, who has said, oh, call me when it's time for my close-up and I will be there. You know, they have all been burned and scalded and carried the heavy pots and like worked their way through this brigade system, and they've earned it. And so I've seen them show up for the poorest and the most like neglected of New Yorkers and young people, and I love that about them. I just feel like at the end of the day there's just nothing quite like it, because there's a lot of glamour once you get at a certain level, but getting there is no real shortcut. I don't know anyone who has, and I think that's pretty amazing. There's not a lot of jobs like that left in our culture, where you really have to do the work. You have to roll up your sleeves and you have to make things. I think that's pretty exemplary, and I love that about chefs.
I have been watching food television since I was a kid, really. And I'll tell you what, it's different now. How? It doesn't look like much fun at all. I mean, who's having fun out there? It's just so competitive. Here's my thoughts on that. The point that I make about these competition shows, whether it's Chopped or, like there's competitions about baking. I mean, like baking needs to be competitive. I don't know. You got Hell's Kitchen. You got people screaming at each other. The point that I make about the television shows is not that they're inherently bad or wrong. I mean, they have their entertainment value, but they're kind of cutthroat, and they're like, everybody's super rushed. Every time I turn the channel, all I hear are people going 5, 4, 3. I mean, that's food television now to me a lot, and it's decidedly not fun. It's so much not fun. Who's having fun out there in TV land? I'll tell you who's having fun. Guy Fieri seems to be having fun. Guy Fieri seems to be one of these kind of figures who people love and hate. I could care less. I watch this guy on Diners, Drive-Ins, and I'm happy watching him eat. I'm happy. He's happy. I'm happy. I see food being made. I see it being eaten. Fine. Guy Fieri's having fun. I think the Barefoot Contessa is having fun, right? She's in the kitchen. She's making stuff. I mean, she's just having a good time in there. Food is lovely, and she's all good. But if you want to know who is having the most fun right now in the world of food television, look up Maddie Matheson. Holy crap. Effin' Maddie Matheson. This guy is having fun. If you have not seen him, check him out on Viceland TV. Again, this is me. I'm not promoting. I recommend things. And if you want to know who's having fun, it's Maddie Matheson on Viceland TV. I'm going to tell you this about Maddie Matheson. First of all, the guy's out of his mind. I just want to be clear about that. He's freaking crazy. That's number one. And that in and of itself is entertaining. Two, this guy knows his stuff, man. I mean, he knows food and he knows how to cook it, and he damn well sure knows how to eat it and have a good time. Good for you, Maddie Matheson. Also very large, by the way. I'm just giving you the facts here. You see Maddie Matheson, the couple of things you'll notice are, one, that he's very large. Two, most of his body is covered in tattoos. I mean most. Most is covered in tattoos. And he'll go shirtless. I'm not saying he weighs 300 pounds, but let's go 275 and shirtless. A lot of tattoos. I'm going to tell you this about Maddie Matheson. He's the best thing on food television since Emeril Lagasse in his prime, in the sense that this dude is in the kitchen. He's having some fun, right? This is like the third wave of food television, right? There was the initial wave one is like the old days, right? You had your Galloping Gourmet, you had your Julia Child, you had your Jacques Pepin. They got on, they did their thing, they cooked, they laughed, they drank, they ate. Lovely. Wave one. Wave two, going into the era of the food TV network. And it started with some, Emeril, and now it's kind of segued into where we are with the competition, primarily kind of driving most of the primetime programming. And now the third wave, I'm telling you, Viceland TV, good on you. And it's not just Maddie Matheson. You can watch Eddie Huang, just fantastic, smart, traveling, commenting. You can watch Action Bronson. Bronson ain't cooking for the most part. He's traveling around the world and eating. A lot of eating. Another huge dude and eating. But fun, man. Just fun. And then Maddie Matheson. If you haven't seen him, check out Maddie Matheson on Vice TV. Hilarity. You haven't noticed, cannabis is in the news everywhere. I think it's recreationally legal now in 9 states, medicinally legal in 23, in the District of Columbia, and more are coming. So I talked with Chef Ronald Silver. He's a chef here in New York with a restaurant called Bubby's. And he also is a cannabis entrepreneur. Fascinating. Here's what he had to say. I just spent some time on the line with a guy named Joe Caruso, CEO of Green Helix. He's producing cannabis, cannabinoid, CBD products, but his, unlike yours, Ron, his are not meant to be ingested. And I'm telling you why I'm excited to talk with you, because I'm a food guy, and so are you. Let me tell people just briefly about you. Ron Silver is the chef and owner of a place down in New York City, multiple places, but it's called Bubby's. And by the way, I want to congratulate you even before we start this conversation, Ron, not just because of your introduction today of Azuka, but because it seems to me that as I was watching episode number 10, season 3 of Billions the other day, was there not a scene that took place in your restaurant?
I think there was, yeah.
Well, that's big news if you ask me. So congratulations on that, first of all.
Well, thank you very much.
Hey, Ron, I did a little homework, and correct me if I'm wrong, but did you not go to Cottonwood High School?
I did go to Cottonwood High School.
How is it possible? Why? Just out of curiosity, what were you doing growing up in Utah?
Well, my father decided that it would be good to move from New York City to Salt Lake City to sell shoes to young Mormon girls, women.
I want
in 1963.
Okay. Now, I want to just, and I hope this doesn't embarrass you in any way, but it's public information. If I were to go to your LinkedIn profile, Ron, what it says about Cottonwood High School, about your education is, in your words, kind of, comma, fields included skiing, marijuana, and dishwashing. Am I right about that?
That is true. All of that is true.
All right, so now let's do a couple of things. First of all, you launched a product today that seems to me, this whole show has been dedicated to, to the whole field of kind of cannabis, marijuana, CBD, and we're in the middle of an explosion, but I really feel as if you're bringing something new to the party. Tell people about what is Azuca, A-Z-U-C-A. Azuca, how do you pronounce it?
Well, Azuca is basically, it really starts off with, it's a series of building blocks, if you will. And I'll take a moment to explain it. So it starts off with a sort of a technology that makes it so the cannabis edible in our edibles are fast acting and a lot more absorbable in your body, bioavailable. And so basically, through a lot of research and study and stuff, I came up with a formula that makes it so it's a lot more understandable. And just to clarify, your normal edible take anywhere from 1 to 4 hours to kick in, and it could take, and your body could absorb anywhere between 2 and 6%, which is sort of a lot of variables if you really need it, especially if you're using it for medicine. And so with our formulation, the cannabis edibles kick in about 15 minutes, right, and your body absorbs anywhere from 18 to 22%.
Right. So this is the fast acting.
So,
yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
So it's a fast acting cannabis edible, and what that does is it allows you to have a consistent dose, and it allows you to have a choice to have a very low dose, which is really an important thing if you are an 80-year-old woman and you really are not a cannabis taker, but it really does help you, and you want the choice to take 2.5 milligrams. Well, that sort of leads me to the next building block in the component, so we've taken this fast-acting technology and applied it to a series of sweeteners like sugar, maple sugar, date sugar, coconut sugar, and stevia, and agave. And basically, those sweeteners are, you can use them by themselves. So a teaspoon of sugar would be 10 milligrams, say.
Right.
And so if you wanted to take 2.5 milligrams, you could take a quarter of a teaspoon. And if you wanted to take 20 milligrams, you can take 2 teaspoons. And it's, it makes it so that you can really understand how much you're taking, and you may have different reasons for taking it. Maybe some people like to use a little bit of cannabis in the morning, and so maybe you just want to have, 5 milligrams in the morning, and at night you might want to have 10. So that's the next series of building blocks, are these sweeteners. And then we've taken it another step, and with these sweeteners we've made a series of syrups. And none of these are really out on the market quite yet. So this is what we're going to be going out with in, somewhere around July. But the syrups are made from the sugars, and with the syrups, and they're all very natural, like pomegranate, grapefruit, almond, orange, lemon, lime, and you can make drinks with those and sort of know that at a party, for example, you could serve those drinks and they're light enough in dosing, or you can choose your dose so that people can have 2 or 3 of those and not be completely dysfunctional or having a bad time. So, and then further than that, we can take those syrups and make candy with them and other things. So we're really trying to build a system of ingredients that people can use to choose their dose and understand how long it's going to take to kick in, and to apply it in different ways and to have a certain amount of creativity with it. So they're like cannabis ingredients. And, just for an example of that, we're going to have a 2 milligram chocolate chip.
So a couple of things here is one is that when I heard you talking about the cocktails and the syrup, I thought to myself, I really got to get to whatever your next party is. That's just want to start with that.
You're welcome to come.
Thank you. Speaking of cannabis, I have said before, and I will say again, we drink a little bit too much coffee in this country, and coffee is really, an addictive drug. So I say we should criminalize the coffee and not the cannabis. My problem with the coffee is that it's a gateway drug, right? I mean, you start off your day with a cup of crank. It's just a matter of time before you're moving on to the harder drugs, your Ambiens and Viagra. Next thing you know, you're falling asleep with a 4-hour erection. No sense. I came up with an idea some years ago, which was to criminalize coffee and not cannabis. I would just turn these Starbucks into dispensaries so that instead of going in for like a cup of brew, you kind of saunter in for a bowl of bud, and instead of drinking Colombian Supremo, you smoke Colombian Supremo. And you ever go in there and you see that they sell the Pike Place roast? I say no to that. I don't need Pike Place roast. You know what? Grind me up an ounce of that Alaska Thunderfuck. That'll be fine. Take that to go. Right? I don't think we need a barista. You go in there, you get a patista, and ask for a doppio. That's what I'm talking about. I love sake. Cold sake. So does my friend Ivy Manning. She and I have a little discussion about that. Your fandom, if you will, of sake, because I feel the same way too. In fact, I think it was yesterday that I published a restaurant review of a place here in New York, in the theater district, a restaurant called Sushi Seki, and I had gone in for a complete kind of tasting menu that was paired with sake, and two things occurred to me. For people who think, for example, that a wine list can be intimidating and hard to decipher, imagine that same wine list in all Japanese characters. You know what I mean? It's like, really, come on, you guys are just joking with me already. Just bring me whatever. That said, because we went in for the pairing, and it was 7 courses. So I think we should talk about the impact of 7 sakis. But the third one that they served was so brilliant to me, was so smooth, was so tasty that literally my wife looked at me and she goes, "This sake right here, I could serve with dinner instead of a bottle of white wine."
Oh, absolutely, yeah. It's a very, very food friendly brew. It's made in a similar way to beer, but with rice instead. But the difference is that it has koji in it, which is a kind of mold that converts the starches in rice to sugar, so that it can then be made out of alcohol. With the koji, it doesn't just do that; it actually adds a lot of flavor, a lot of umami. So there are sakes that are really koji forward. If you like that kind of funky, a little bit funky mushroom savory quality to your sakes. And that's really what we go for when we're pairing with food, especially meats and anything, like a big eye tuna, something meatier. Eel is another good with the koji forward sake. And if you ask for one of those, even if it's all Japanese characters, you can ask for a koji forward one, and you're kind of faking it until you make it. They'll make you sound like you really know what you're doing, and then they'll bring you something that'll be great with food, big dishes, mushrooms, and.
I'm a fan. I'm a fan, and God, that was good. So this evening, a reminder that Father's Day is coming up soon, so you still have time to order a book for the men, dads, people in your life who are expressing interest in cooking. The book is called Short Order Dad, One Guy's Guide to Making Food Fun and Hassle-Free. The author is me. And as I tell people about the book, I went to cooking school so that you don't have to. In it, I tell you everything that you need to know about making great tasting food at home with my very user-friendly formula for getting the most taste with the fewest ingredients and the least effort. It's fun, it's funny, it's easy, but most important, it is practical. I mean, I literally talk to people about the 10 fundamental cooking techniques, the few kind of tools you may need to have in the kitchen, the kind of stuff you want to stock in your pantry, and then the recipes, of which there are 100, predominantly, I would say like 95 of them, use 5-6 ingredients max, right? So a great book. Pick it up on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Walmart, wherever you want to go, probably $12-13 in that price range, and say Happy Father's Day to the men in your life, because this is the book, by the way, that keeps on giving, because when you get dads to cook, everybody else in the family benefits. That's it for this week, my friends. Back next Wednesday at 8 o'clock Eastern Time for All You Can Eat. And remember, life is short, so never waste a meal.
I'm the Teflon Pan Man. I'm the Teflon Pan Man. Ain't nothing gonna stick on me.